I came to her party disguised as a guest, and one scene changed everything. It started with something so small I almost convinced myself it didn't matter. I had just walked into the bedroom to grab my phone charger. That's it. No confrontation, no suspicion, no reason to think twice. Catherine was sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling. Her face lit up by her screen, eyebrows slightly lifted like something on the phone had just made her smile. She didn't even look up when I entered. I remember thinking it was strange she didn't notice me come in. She usually did. We were the kind of couple that always acknowledged each other, even in passing. I reached down to grab the charger from the nightstand, and that's when it happened. Her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Jason, can't wait to see you tonight, red heart. That red heart. One emoji. It burned into my brain instantly. For a second, I froze. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a laugh from her? A quick explanation? Or even a casual, "Oh, Jason sends hearts to everyone." But that wasn't what happened. She saw the direction of my gaze, snatched the phone off the bed with lightning speed, and flipped it face down. Like a reflex, she didn't even smile this time. Just said, "It's nothing," in a tone that was too light, too clipped. And then she added, "Just some work stuff," as she unplugged the charger and handed it to me like it was some kind of offering. Work stuff? With a heart? Didn't realize hearts were a new corporate policy. I joked, weakly. I didn't mean it to come off accusatory. But even to my own ears, it didn't land right. Catherine rolled her eyes, not in the playful way she used to, but in that dismissive, almost annoyed way. "Don't be weird, Tom. It's just a message. Jason's always like that. He sends emojis to everyone. You know how people are these days." She got up and walked to the closet like it was the end of the conversation. But it wasn't. Not for me. I told myself it was harmless, that I was overreacting, that if I let myself spiral over one message, one heart emoji, I'd become the kind of husband who snoops through phones and monitors texts. Something I'd promised myself I'd never be. We built our marriage on trust. I reminded myself of that over and over. And yet, something didn't sit right. Later that evening, she came downstairs dressed for the dinner. And that's when the second red flag slapped me across the face. She was wearing the black dress. It had been years, literally years, since she last pulled it out. I remembered it well. We had gone to her cousin's wedding in Atlanta. I remembered the way she looked that night, the way I couldn't stop staring at her as she laughed with family and danced like she had no weight on her shoulders. She looked beautiful then. She looked beautiful now, too. But something was different. This time, her hair was styled in soft waves. Makeup carefully done. Perfume, not the one she usually wore. Something stronger, floral, unfamiliar, elegant. "You look wow," I said honestly, walking into the hallway as she grabbed her clutch. She turned slightly, giving a modest smile, like she appreciated the compliment but didn't want to dwell on it. "Thanks. Figured I should dust this off. Company dinners are always so awkward. At least if I look good, it gives me a bit of confidence." I nodded. "Yeah, definitely. I could tag along, though, if you want. Might make it less awkward." It wasn't a demand, just an offer. I expected a laugh or maybe a teasing comment about being her arm candy. But instead, she froze, just for a second. The smile faltered. Then, just as quickly, she recovered. "Oh no," she said, waving me off. "It's strictly work people. Spouses aren't invited and you've got that Q3 report, right? Didn't you say you were behind on it?" The Q3 report. She pulled that one fast. And I was behind, technically, but not so much that I couldn't take one night off. Still, I didn't push. I watched as she gathered her things, casually checking herself in the mirror by the door. Then she turned to me with a breezy, "Don't wait up. It might run late. I'll text you." Then she was gone. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than I should have, staring at the door after it shut. A hollow feeling settled in my chest, something I couldn't quite name. Not quite jealousy, not quite paranoia, but something. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a drink I didn't really want, and sat at the table staring at my laptop, the Q3 report untouched. I couldn't focus. Not really. I started to replay everything. Jason, the heart emoji, her sudden urge to dress to the nines, the new perfume, the excuse about the report, the way she deflected without hesitation. I reminded myself that people change, that maybe she just wanted to feel good, look good, go out and be social after months of stress and work, that maybe it really was nothing, that I was being overly suspicious because I've read one too many late-night Reddit posts that start with "my wife's acting weird." But then again, those posts existed for a reason. At 9:36 p.m. I checked my phone. No message from her. 10:14, still nothing. At 10:43, she sent me a quick, "Hey, still at the dinner. Might be late. Love you." No heart. No emoji. Just plain text. I stared at the screen for a full minute before locking the phone and placing it face down on the table. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe not. But that night, for the first time in a long while, I went to bed with a strange ache behind my ribs. Like something was shifting, just out of sight. She came home around midnight. I heard the door open and the light footsteps on hardwood. She was trying to be quiet, I could tell. I stayed still, pretending to sleep. I heard the click of her heels being removed. The soft thud of her purse dropped onto the entry bench. Then silence. Eventually, the bed dipped slightly as she slipped in beside me. She didn't touch me, didn't say anything, just pulled the blanket over herself and laid there, still as a statue. I stared at the ceiling in the dark. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were deafening. After that night, things didn't fall apart immediately. That's the strange part. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic. It was more like a thread quietly unraveling from a sweater. Barely noticeable at first, but once you spotted it, you couldn't stop pulling. The morning after the dinner, Catherine acted like everything was normal. She came down to the kitchen in her robe, hair still pinned up from the night before, and poured herself coffee without so much as a word about the event. "Dinner go okay?" I asked, watching her from across the table. She paused, just briefly, then nodded as she blew on her cup. "Yeah." Long, exhausting. Jason didn't shut up the whole time. She chuckled softly, but it sounded forced. "You didn't miss much." Jason, of course. Something about the way she said his name, casually like a coworker she barely tolerated, didn't sit right with me, especially after that heart emoji. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I just sipped my coffee and filed it away, adding it to the quiet little box of doubts I was starting to collect in my mind. That box filled up faster than I expected. In the weeks that followed, I began to notice shifts. Subtle ones. Nothing that screamed, "something's wrong," but enough to make me wonder if I was going crazy. Her routines changed first. Catherine had always been a morning shower kind of person. She used to wake up early, hop in the shower, do her makeup, and make coffee all before I'd even gotten out of bed. But lately, she was showering in the evening, sometimes late, sometimes twice a day. She said it helped her sleep. And sure, that made sense. I didn't argue, but still, it was different. Then there were the clothes. One evening, I walked past the laundry room and saw a blouse I didn't recognize draped over the basket. Cream silk. Definitely new. Not her usual workwear. And when I asked if she'd gone shopping, she brushed it off. "Just something I had lying around," she said. That blouse still had a tag tucked in the seam. I started picking up on other things too, like how she never left her phone unattended anymore. She used to leave it charging on the kitchen counter, screen up, pinging with texts and emails. Now it was always face down, on silent, and if it ever buzzed while we were in the room together, she'd pick it up and excuse herself to the hallway, claiming it was work or mom. Even her laptop, which she used to leave open on the couch while she worked from home, became a fortress. I walked in one afternoon to ask her if she wanted a smoothie. Stupid, I know. And the moment she heard me, she slammed the lid down so fast you'd think I'd caught her watching something illegal. "Oh," she said, flustered. "Just going over budget spreadsheets. Boring stuff." It didn't feel like spreadsheets. At dinner, the silences grew louder. She still smiled when I spoke, but her eyes rarely lifted from her phone. If I made a joke, she'd give a polite laugh, the kind strangers give during awkward small talk. We used to talk about everything. Our jobs, our plans, our dumb little dreams. Now, the most and asterisk mate thing she shared with me was asking if I wanted the last piece of garlic bread. One night I reached for her hand across the table. Something I hadn't done in a while, I realized, and she pulled away, saying her wrist was sore from typing all day. That's when it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time she touched me first, and even when she did, it felt practiced, like she was checking a box. A peck on the cheek before heading out. A quick rub on the shoulder as she passed by. None of it lingered. None of it felt real. And I started to wonder if it ever really had. There was also the perfume. This one got under my skin in a way I still can't explain. Catherine had always worn the same scent. A subtle citrus blend, nothing overpowering. But it smelled like her. Lately, though, there was something new. A bold floral perfume, heavier and unfamiliar. I asked about it once. She said it was just a sample from a magazine. Said she didn't like it much. But I kept smelling it. On her coat. In the hallway. In our bedroom, faintly, even after she left for work. Yet I never found the bottle. All these pieces, on their own, could have been dismissed. People change. Routines evolve. Marriages ebb and flow. But together, they painted a picture I didn't want to see. Picture I wasn't ready for. And yet, I couldn't stop looking at it. One night, I lay awake beside her in bed while she scrolled on her phone. The glow from her screen lit up her face. And for a moment, I watched her from the corner of my eye. Her expression was soft, focused, almost affectionate. She smiled, the way someone does when they read something sweet. A private smile. Not for me. I turned over, pretending to shift in my sleep, just to see if she'd put the phone down when she noticed I was watching. She didn't. In fact, she turned her body slightly away from me. The next morning, I asked her if everything was okay between us. She looked at me like I'd asked if the sun was still going to rise. Of course it is, she said quickly. Why wouldn't it be? I don't know, I replied. We've just been off, that's all. She kissed me on the forehead. Again, robotic, and said, You're overthinking again, babe. We're fine. Just busy. Busy. That word again. I nodded, and we both went on with our day like nothing happened. But something had. Or maybe it had been happening for a while and I was just now admitting it. That night, I sat in the car for 20 minutes before walking into the house. I don't know why. I guess I needed a moment. The idea of stepping into a home that no longer felt like home was something I hadn't prepared for. Inside, Catherine was in the kitchen, humming softly to herself. She didn't even glance at me as I walked in. We've got leftovers, she called over her shoulder. Help yourself. I stood in the hallway watching her. She looked the same. She sounded the same. But the woman I married, the one who used to run into my arms after long days, who used to lay her head on my chest and tell me everything that was on her mind, she wasn't there anymore. She was somewhere else. And I was starting to think I knew exactly who she was with. The truth came to me on a gray Saturday morning. Not with shouting or a text or a screaming match, but with silence and a lie I could finally see through. Catherine stood in the doorway, slipping into a pair of running shoes. She wore black leggings, a loose tank, hair pulled into a high ponytail, the kind of outfit she wore when she went to yoga class. She glanced over her shoulder at me, casual as ever. I'll be gone a couple hours. The studio added a new stretch instructor. Should be good. I nodded slowly, pretending to sip my coffee. You taking your mat? She paused barely, then laughed lightly. Nah, they've got extras at the studio. Saves me from carrying it. That was the tell. Catherine never used the studio mats. Germs, she'd always said. They reek of sweat. I remembered the dozens of times she'd ranted about it. Even joked that it was the hill she'd die on. And now she was leaving without hers? I glanced down at the bag slung over her shoulder. Small, light, more like a makeup bag than anything else. Have fun, I said quietly. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. Cold, practiced, and walked out the door. The moment it clicked shut behind her, I stood up. Not in a rush, not in a panic. just with a quiet resolve I hadn't felt before. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and waited by the window until her car disappeared down the street. Then I followed. I'd never done anything like this before. I'm not proud of it. I don't like what it says about me, about who I'd become, and what our marriage had turned me into. But I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep staring at puzzle pieces and wondering what the full picture was. I needed to see it for myself. Catherine didn't head to the yoga studio. Instead, she drove across town, past the strip mall where the studio sat, past the intersection where we used to grab coffee on Sunday mornings. She kept going until she reached the edge of the historic district, where the streets narrowed and trees arched overhead like tunnels. She parked near a small wine bar. I knew the place well. We'd gone there once on our anniversary. A cozy spot with dim lights and vintage jazz on the speakers. It was the kind of place people went when they wanted to talk in whispers and lean in close. I pulled to the curb half a block down, engine off, heart racing. I sat there, still watching her in the rearview mirror. She got out slowly, smoothing her clothes, checking her reflection in the side mirror. Then she walked to the entrance of the bar. That's when I saw him, Jason. He was already there, leaning against the brick wall, dressed far too nicely for a casual Saturday morning. Button-up shirt, nice jeans, clean-shaven. His phone was in his hand, but the second he spotted her, it dropped to his side. And then it happened. She smiled. Not the half-hearted, distracted smile I'd gotten used to seeing, but a real one, full, bright, the kind that used to be mine, the kind that used to mean something. He opened the door for her, his hand resting at the small of her back as they walked inside. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching the glass door close behind them, the reflection of the street swallowing them whole. My heart felt like it had detached from my body. Not shattered, not yet, but heavy. So unbearably heavy I couldn't tell if I was breathing. I got out of the car and walked to the window, far enough to stay unseen but close enough to see what I needed. They were sitting at a small table by the far wall, backs to the bar, drinks already in front of them. Mimosas. She hated mimosas, said they were just sugar and watered-down champagne. But she was sipping it now, laughing at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm as she reached for her glass. His body leaned toward hers, not dramatically, just enough to close the space between them. His arm draped behind her chair. Familiar, comfortable, like this wasn't new. She didn't pull away. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough to see her touch his hand. Long enough to watch him reach up and tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. Slowly, like he'd done it before. That was when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't one awkward kiss or a moment of weakness. This was a second life. A parallel track she'd been walking right next to mine, while I kept pretending we were on the same one. I walked back to my car, hands shaking slightly. Not from rage. Not even heartbreak. From clarity. I didn't confront them. I didn't burst in or yell or demand answers. I didn't need to. I'd already gotten the answer I came for. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just played it all back in my head, the texts, the perfume, the fake yoga classes, the late-night showers. Every single thing I'd brushed off or buried under excuses came rushing to the surface. And I realized something terrifying. I had seen it all. Every sign. Every cue. I just didn't want to believe it. When I got home, the house felt different. Colder. Not physically, but emotionally. Like whatever warmth had once lived here had packed up and left with her that morning. I walked through each room slowly, like I was seeing it for the first time. Our framed wedding photo by the stairs. The little notes we used to leave on the fridge. The playlist she made me last Valentine's Day, still saved on the speaker's Bluetooth. It all felt staged now, like props in a play we'd stopped performing long ago. Hours passed. She came home around 2:30 in the afternoon. Hair windblown, cheeks slightly flushed. She kicked off her shoes at the door and walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. "Hey!" she called out. Yoga ran late. I stopped to grab a smoothie. I stood in the hallway watching her move. She didn't notice. She went to the sink, washed her hands, then pulled her phone from her pocket and smiled faintly at something on the screen. Probably Jason. She looked up, finally noticing me, and jumped slightly. "Oh, I didn't see you there. Everything okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." She walked past me, giving my shoulder a quick pat. "Gonna shower. I feel gross." Of course she was. Of course she did. I watched her walk upstairs, each step echoing like a ticking clock. In that moment I knew, not just what she was doing, but that it was over. And the most painful part? She didn't even know I knew. After that Saturday, something shifted in me. Not a break. Not yet, but a deep, irreversible bend. Like a steel beam starting to bow under weight it was never meant to carry. Catherine didn't notice. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. Either way, she kept up the routine. She came home, dropped her bag, kissed me on the cheek, asked what was for dinner, as if the hours she'd spent with Jason, tucked into that booth like it was their own private world, didn't exist. I didn't bring it up. Not because I was scared, but because something in me needed to watch her keep pretending. I needed to see if the lie could survive the weight of its own performance. I think, in some twisted way, I wanted her to confess. Not just for closure, but to see if she had enough of the woman I once loved still left in her to tell the truth. She never did. Instead, things got quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, but from avoidance. She moved through the house like an actress between takes, smiling when necessary, speaking only when prompted, and retreating the moment the scene ended. We stopped sitting on the couch together. She took her laptop to the bedroom more often, claiming she needed a quiet space to finish reports. I stopped asking what she was working on. I knew better now. Dinner became a ritual of forks scraping plates and shallow conversation. How was work? Busy. Anything new with Jason? She blinked at me just once. Not really. That was the first time I used his name out loud since the wine bar. I said it softly, casually, like I was mentioning a neighbor, but I watched her face. The tiniest pause. A flicker. Her poker face was good, but not perfect. She picked up her wine glass and smiled. "Why do you ask?" I shrugged. "Just curious. You talk about him sometimes." "Do I?" she asked, tilting her head. "Ha, guess he comes up. We're on a lot of the same projects." I nodded and went back to cutting my chicken. That was it. That was the whole exchange. But underneath it, I felt something cold press against my chest. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just confirmation. She was going to keep lying. One evening, I watched her from the living room as she sat on the back patio. She was on the phone, laughing. That genuine, unfiltered laugh I hadn't heard from her in months. Her hand rested on her knee, fingers playing with the hem of her shorts. The way she looked down and smiled told me everything. She wasn't talking to a client, or her sister, or her mom. She was talking to him. I thought about stepping outside, about asking who it was, but I didn't. I stayed where I was and listened to the laughter fade into a low murmur. I stared at the wall for a long time that night, wondering how much of my marriage had been real and how much had been convenient. There's something uniquely cruel about sharing space with someone who's already emotionally gone. You see them every day. Their shoes by the door, their toothbrush in the holder, their scent in the hallway, but it's like living with a ghost that still eats, breathes, and pays the bills. I stopped trying to touch her. Felt like reaching across a canyon. One night, lying in bed, I turned toward her and brushed her arm with my fingertips. Just a light touch, instinctual. She shifted away, didn't say a word, just rolled over and tugged the blanket with her. That was the night I realized we hadn't kissed, really kissed, in weeks, probably months. I couldn't even remember the last time she said, "I love you," without it sounding like muscle memory. She used to say it first. Every morning, every night. It had been her thing. She once told me she'd grown up in a house where those words weren't said enough, and she promised me she'd never be that kind of wife. But now, if I said it, and that was rare, she'd reply in a tone so flat it felt like a recording. "Love you too." No eye contact, no softness, just obligation. She started going to bed earlier, or later, depending on my schedule. Almost like she was timing her routines to avoid overlapping with mine. She claimed she was tired. That work was draining. I pretended to believe her. She pretended to care that I did. The space between us grew so gradually that it almost felt natural, like watching two trees grow apart in slow motion. We still lived under the same roof, but everything else, the laughter, the warmth, the friendship, had been stripped away. Even the fights were gone. And in some ways, that was worse. We used to argue about real things, finances, family visits, her tendency to leave dishes in the sink, my habit of zoning out during conversations. They weren't pleasant, but at least they meant we cared enough to fight. Now, nothing. She could spend half the day on her phone, or disappear for hours and I'd say nothing. I could sleep on the couch and she wouldn't ask why. We just coexisted. I started to keep a journal. Not because I thought it would fix anything, but because I needed a place to put my thoughts, somewhere outside of the prison of my head. I wrote down details. The little things she said. The way she looked at me or didn't. The lies I knew were lies but couldn't prove. It helped, a little. One entry just said, "She laughs at her phone more than she laughs with me." Another, "She used to hum when she cooked. Now she doesn't cook at all." And this one, "I think she's waiting for me to end it so she doesn't have to be the villain." That last one stuck with me, because I could feel it in everything she did, the distance, the coldness, the way she avoided serious conversation. She wasn't trying to save us. She was trying to escape the guilt of being the one to burn it down. So instead, she slowly suffocated the relationship and waited for me to say the words she couldn't. One night we were watching TV or pretending to, some show she used to love. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling like a chasm. At one point, she reached for the remote and brushed my hand. She flinched. It was subtle, but it was there, like my touch startled her, or repulsed her, and I realized then, she hadn't just checked out emotionally. She was uncomfortable being close to me, being seen by me. That was when I finally understood. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a placeholder. The next morning, she offered to make coffee. That used to mean something. It used to be a small, sweet gesture, her way of starting the day together. But now it was just another line in the script. I watched her set the mug down in front of me without looking up. "Cream's in the fridge," she said, already turning away. I didn't drink it. Later that week, I found an old photo album buried in the closet. I wasn't looking for it. I was just cleaning, trying to distract myself. But there it was, tucked behind a stack of towels. I sat on the floor flipping through pages of a life I barely recognized. Our honeymoon in Santa Fe, her 30th birthday, the camping trip where it rained all weekend and we ended up dancing under a tarp. So many smiles, so much light. And now she barely looked at me. I closed the album and slid it back where I found it. That night, I asked her if she wanted to do something over the weekend. Grab lunch, go for a drive, maybe visit her parents. She looked up from her phone, lips parting in surprise. "This weekend? I think I have plans." "With who?" She hesitated. "Not sure yet. Work friends." "Work friends. Jason." I nodded. "Okay, no problem." She smiled politely and went back to her phone, and I went back to my silence. Because the truth was, I already knew where she'd be, and with whom. And slowly, painfully, I was beginning to understand. I didn't lose her that day at the wine bar. I lost her long before that. I just hadn't realized it yet. It had been 3 weeks since I followed Catherine to the wine bar. 3 weeks of pretending. 3 weeks of hearing her tell me she was going to yoga, to team lunches, to late meetings, all while I nodded and said, "Okay, sounds good." I didn't ask questions. I didn't challenge her stories. I just watched and waited. I had stopped looking for explanations. I didn't need them anymore. But a part of me still held on to something small. Not hope exactly, more like morbid curiosity. I wanted to see how far she was willing to take it. I wanted to know what version of the truth she was willing to live in. That answer came on a Saturday night. She had been talking about a private party all week. "Marcy's throwing something for her birthday," she said, almost offhandedly while folding laundry. I wasn't going to go, but she insisted. I looked up from my book. "What kind of party?" "Nothing big. Just a few people. Mostly co-workers. She's renting out some lounge space downtown. You'd hate it." The casual dismissal didn't go unnoticed. "I wouldn't mind going," I said, just to see how she'd respond. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's girls only." I nodded, pretending to believe her. "Right? Of course." She left the house that evening dressed like she was going to a gala, not a casual birthday hangout. Deep green satin dress, gold earrings I'd forgotten she owned, hair pinned back, loose strands framing her face just so. Perfume, strong, floral, familiar by now. "You look amazing," I said as she grabbed her clutch. "Thanks," she replied, barely meeting my eyes. "Don't wait up, okay? I might stay over at Marcy's if we drink too much." "Got it," I said. I waited 20 minutes after she left. Then I grabbed my keys. I already knew the location. Marcy had posted about it earlier that day, a tagged photo on her Instagram story of the lounge's velvet-lined entrance. She probably hadn't even realized it was public. I parked a block away, heart pounding harder than it should have been. I told myself I didn't know what I expected, that maybe they were just friends. Maybe Jason was part of some larger group. Maybe I wouldn't find anything at all. But deep down I already knew. The place was packed. Music thumped from inside, some remix of a pop song I didn't recognize. The bouncer didn't blink when I walked in, just nodded and waved me through. I blended into the crowd easily. Just another guy in a button-down, scanning the room for a drink or a familiar face. And then I saw her, Catherine, in the center of the room, glowing under the low amber lights, drink in one hand, the other resting lightly, casually on Jason's arm. She was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in over a year. Her head tilted back slightly, mouth open, eyes soft and bright. Jason leaned in, saying something near her ear, and she touched his chest without hesitation, as if it were hers to touch, as if he were hers to hold. There was no tension between them, no discomfort, just ease, familiarity. Int asterisk Macy. My stomach dropped. It was like watching a film reel of someone else's love story. Except the lead actress was wearing my wife's face. They didn't see me, or maybe they did and didn't care. I stood half-shrouded near the bar, unnoticed in the crowd, invisible in the noise. I could have walked up and said something. I could have pulled her aside and ended it all right then and there. But I didn't, because I needed to see it. I needed to see her choose him without hesitation. I needed to see, with my own eyes, that I was no longer in the running. That the person I'd spent nearly a decade with had rewritten the story of US and handed the co-starring role to someone else. And there it was. Jason's hand slid down to her lower back. She leaned in closer. He said something and she smiled. A slow, knowing smile that made my chest tighten with a kind of grief I didn't have words for. They looked like a couple. Not new, not forbidden, just together. And that's what broke me. Not the cheating, not the betrayal, but the comfort, the confidence in their closeness. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't a phase. It was a replacement. I left without saying a word. The cold hit me as I stepped outside. I didn't remember walking back to the car. I just remember sitting behind the wheel, hands frozen on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard like it might give me a reason to stay. But there was no reason left. The next morning, she came home around 9 a.m. Hair slightly messy, lipstick faded. She carried her heels in one hand and her clutch in the other. Quiet footsteps on the hardwood. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a coffee I didn't want. "Morning," she said, clearly not expecting me to be awake. I looked at her. Really looked. She blinked. "Didn't sleep?" "No," I said flatly. She moved toward the sink, slow and cautious. "Party went late. We ended up crashing at Marcy's. You know how she is." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." She didn't turn around. just filled a glass of water and kept her back to me. I didn't say anything else. What was there left to say? She drank the water in silence, then walked upstairs without looking back. Later that day, she texted me from the other room. "Want to watch something tonight?" I stared at the message, thumbs hovering. Then I locked the screen and left it unanswered. That was the moment I understood we had crossed a line. And we weren't coming back. Catherine suggested we spend the weekend at her family's old cabin. "Just us," she said, like we could rewind something that was already erased. She played old songs, cooked my favorite meals, told stories from when we still laughed together. But her eyes stayed on her phone. Even by the fire, her warmth felt forced. At night, we lay side by side like strangers. I realized this wasn't a reset. It was her way of saying goodbye without the courage to say the words. Back home, I filed for divorce. No arguments. No scene. Her response came in waves: regret, rage, bargaining. None of it mattered. At a company event weeks later, I overheard her joking, "Well, at least he paid the bills." That was the final nail, not the betrayal but the mockery. Love had died long ago. I didn't yell. I didn't even flinch. I just walked away, silent and free, knowing the life I'd clung to wasn't mine anymore.